remember. Then, brother, you're much older than I, and that's quite impossible. Some of the things I did as a kid, I imagine you did. Others, I hope you didn't. Some of the things I'm going to talk about, you probably, some of you here have never heard in your life. But you'll be getting a little dose of history if you haven't, so. I began this with my infancy, but after 18 pages I started editing. You wouldn't know any of my lullabies that I talked about, unless maybe it's Marilyn Carr. And they were all about little black babies. For this was the era of songs about po' black folk. And the N-word has never bothered me, for it's part of history. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo, catch a nigger by the toe. It's now Tiger and Little Black Sambo's been bleached to East India. President Hoover was a water boy. Another language shocker. Now, I can't control my urge to ask if anyone here has ever heard of a sugar tip. A small measure of sugar, about the size of a large marble, was tied in the end of a large hanky or white cloth and given to a baby to stop its crying. Now, I didn't realize that this was actually a part of history until a German tour guide told the story that in olden days they were laced with a narcotic, and that turned the children into kind of numbed addicts and prevented their complaining about a hard day's labor on the farm. Of course, this was the forerunner of pacifiers. I grew up during the Depression, when the hobos knocked on your door constantly for a handout, but about the only thing that depressed me was that it was time for Grandma to comb my long banana curls. My father died of cancer when I was 4.5, and I became the proverbial spoiled brat, being raised by 3 doting women, my mother, my grandma, and my Aunt Martha, who was childless until I was 14. In 1931, she married Ernest J. Hayden. All were devastated when they discovered I had lopped off my long curls because I wanted to look like Uncle Gay. Mom, Justine, and Martha had to work at the shoe factory, so Grandma had to put up with me. This caused a treasured, unforgettable moment for me, though, for I was 20 when she became ill, and shortly before her death, she told me, "You're my favorite grandchild." There were 21 of us, so that was quite pleasurable to me. I recall only 7 brief events that occurred while my father was alive, and most were traumatic. Now, that's what the picture I passed around goes with. As one reviews the architecture of the old Ely house, y'all know where that is, okay? It appears to have been a very majestic establishment with stables in the back and stone lions guarding the front sidewalks. It was originally part of the old Harbor Inn or Quonset Hotel property. And legend tells us that Frank James lodged here, and Abe Lincoln delivered a campaign speech under a tree. This picture is the only one I have ever seen of the lion. And the little boy, I got this emailed to me about a year ago, and now the girl that emailed it to me can't remember even emailing it to me, let alone who the little boy is. But she thinks that he's Chris Craig. And there were 4 Van Dyke girls in school when I was in school. One of them was in my class, and this would be her first son. And the sister that emailed this to me she didn't know how the little boy happened to be on this line, but every kid in the if they were in that neighborhood, everybody played on that line. Suzanne Bland, I was talking to her about it. She remembers it well. She just lived across the street. But this little boy's name would be Christopher Craig. And his mother, Betty Lou Van Dyke Craig, she and her other 3 sisters, they were first cousins once removed from Dick and Jerry Van Dyke. My dad made me a bank from a round beige-colored cardboard oyster carton, and all the spitters of the filthy weed would gather on the curb in front of Sherrick and Barger's Hardware to visit and whittle. And they would drop pennies in my cardboard bank when I accompanied my father. The Sherrick and Barger's, I presume you know where that was. Max does. That was the west building of the 3 that D&M comprised, D&M Hardware. I presume I had a thread spool necklace. At least Mom made them for my girls by painting them a variety of colors and stringing them on a long shoelace. We didn't want for thread spools. All my women were excellent seamstresses, and most clothes were homemade, which included coats with fur collars and matching hats. I'm sure I was a fashion statement. I don't recall ever wearing the hated black bloomers. And instead of the long tan cotton stockings, I had silky white hose. Je ne sais quoi. I did have a store-bought dress, though, for my 6-year-old portrait. Probably others, but this one in particular. It was a copy of a frilly Shirley Temple frock that she wore in one of her first movies, Baby Take a Bow. We lived where the Catholic Parish Hall is. The entrance to their parking lot was our driveway. I spent almost all my time at the house next door, however, Woody Freeman's. Their daughter Marion, 8 years my senior, adopted me as her little baby sister. I sat under a big tree and watched Sis and her high school gang play tennis on the courts that were east of our backyard. So it'd be sort of in the middle of the Catholic property because they own the whole block now. I couldn't pronounce the letter S. En route to Presbyterian Church, I would make a stop at Freeman's, and they knew full well where I was going. But they'd say, "Where are you going all dressed up?" They just wanted to hear my answer. "I'm going to hang a hong and honey hoo." And I soon caught on to their request for me to count to 100. I cut this performance short, and I went straight to Hickety Hicks and Heaven to Heaven. We were sent to the basement during the church service to play in the sandbox, a huge, it was about this size, 4-sided though, filled up with sand with toys in it. Sunday school preceded church, and one of the highlights was the penny march or drill, particularly if you were one of the 2 selected to stand up front and hold the collection plates. I still love all the old hymns. What a friend we have in Jesus, leaning on the everlasting arms, In my heart there rings a melody, and my favorite dwelling in Beulah land. And I brought home the sheaves several summers from the Methodist Bible School. On religious or holiday occasions, we always had a program with recitations, which we called Speaking a Piece. Music and poetry have always been a big part of my life. Oh, it ain't gonna rain no more, no more. It ain't gonna rain no more. How in the heck can I wash my neck if it ain't gonna rain no more? Rain, rain, go away, little Bobbie wants to play. Well, actually, we liked playing in the rain. Made Gene Kelly a fortune. Ditches were deep back then, with water up to your shins to run and splash in. My grandma taught me all kinds of funny songs and poems, and I've sung them and said them to my great-grandkids. Oh, law, ma'am, look at Sam eating all the meat out, sopping out the pan. Ma'am slapped Sam for sopping out the pan. Sam kept sopping it like he didn't give a darn. Old Dan Tucker was a fine old man. Ate his supper in the frying pan. He combed his hair with a wagon wheel. Died with a toothache in his heel. In the land of San Domingo lived a girl named Bobbie Jingo. Na 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 na. Pa, pa, pa. From the fields and from the marshes came the little oh by goshes. Na 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 na. Pa, pa, pa. They all sang a different lingo, but they all loved Bobbie Jingo. And every night they'd sing in the pale moonlight. Oh, by gee, by gosh, by gum, by Jove. Oh, by Jingo, you're the one we love. We will build for you a hut. You will be our favorite nut. We'll have a lot of little oh by gollies, and we'll put them in the follies. By Jingo said, by gosh, by gee. By Jiminy, please don't bother me. So they all went away singing, oh, by gee, by gosh, by gum, by Jingo. By gee, you're the only girl for me. I could stand for hours and listen to Marion and her mom Midge play the piano duets, if I could stand it, because I would cry my eyes out. They were so beautiful, such as, and I'm going to bring things back here to Marilyn, because I know she's probably got stacks of all of this music. But Wedding of the Painted Doll. And I learned so many songs I never would have learned anyplace else. I guess my daughter Doris inherited this, for by the time I had when I took her to church, when she would hear this one certain hymn, she'd start crying so loud that I had to carry her out of the church. And then I would have to shut the stereo off when the record reached So Rare. She couldn't handle it. Do you cry when you hear a pretty song? So it really gets you right here. Freeman's had a large house, and they rented out 2 rooms, the front bedroom to Coleman Hall, and the middle to Earl Little. I just made her rhyme. Little was a teacher, and he gave me permission to play his Victrola while he was at school. I sat and cranked that old phonograph until Amapola was ready to move back to Spain. The same thing occurred at my Cincinnati aunt's when I discovered the player roll Dardanella for her pump organ. I nearly drove the family crazy. You rarely see a screen with lyrics and the bouncing ball anymore. I guess karaoke's taken its place. Sunday mornings, we'd lie on the floor in front of the radio, open the newspaper, and follow the comic strips as we listened to the Sunday funnies. The Gumps, Little Orphan Annie, Gasoline Alley, Skeezicks, Cats and Jammer Kids, and I didn't have a clue that Amos and Andy were really white men. The whole family listened during the evening to the #1 serial, One Man's Family, for it aired right at supper time. It couldn't snow often or deep enough to suit us, and we went sledding daily, the high school group at Kellum's Hill. That's where the winery is. The rest of us on the hill where the new Baptist church has been built. Rosie Eubank, that's Rosemary Brandenburg to you folks, also had an adopted big sister. She and Marion took us sledding. The boys would build a bonfire at the bottom of the hill, but it wasn't sufficient to dry me out after I peed my pants. The big sisters took us to the back room of the Greeks, where there was a pot-bellied stove and where the high school kids hung out to skip school. My sled was a flyer with steel runners, a steering bar, and room for 3, and we also hooked onto the back bumper of a car. Not too safe, but youth throws caution to the winds. When I was wont to throw a tizzy and run away from home, it didn't bother my mom. She knew she could find me 3 blocks down the street at the Eubank house. I must have been half tomboy and half girly girl. I had a pocket knife for mumblepeg, ball and jacks, dice, marbles, a cork shooting rifle or pop gun, pea shooter, lead soldiers with a little silver cannon that shot toothpicks, cap guns, the latter necessary to play cops and robbers or cowboys and Indians, in the big barns downtown in back of most of the business buildings. When the 2 little Redman boys came over from across the street, we'd make all kinds of roads and tracks in the dust for our little toy cars and trucks. Most residences had barns, and the more affluent had ice houses. And don't forget the dually. Climb up in the loft and jump down in the hay. We made our own fun, and our texting was passing notes. We didn't even have TV, much less computers, iPhones, Kindles, Game Boys, but we had imagination. The high-tech toys are literally amazing. And my 3-year-old great-granddaughter's getting her education by way of apps. And her 7th grade brother is teaching her Spanish. Well, they should be verbally equipped for a move to Miami in 2043 when we become the Latino Estados Unidos. I surely had a lot of dolls, but I can only remember one. I must have been a poor mother, for her rubber legs got spongy and sticky and the face paint started chipping off. I had a doll bed and blankets, a trunk for clothes, and with no wash and wear, I had a little toy iron and ironing board, numerous small 4-inch china dolls with moving arms and painted faces. Playmate, come out and play with me, and bring your dollies 3, climb up my apple tree, slide down my rain barrel, climb down my cellar door, and we'll be jolly friends forevermore. And the Draper girls were my jolly friends. They lived just around the corner. They came to play, and I always insisted every toy be put back in its spatial place. Marcella chided me about this all of her life. That's what you get when you're friends with a Virgo. Her sister, Nita Bell, was also a Virgo, but with a 7-year age span. And Nita was more interested in Ken's than Barbie's. Have you ever had a pound party? Played spin the bottle? Truth or consequences? Post office? Well, Mars, Helen, and I hung around the outskirts of the tree, which was the post office, watching and wishing we were old enough to get a letter and climb the tree for a kiss. I loved paper dolls, particularly the huge ones. We had great big ones. Our heads were about that big. And they were called Dolly Dimples, for their faces looked like the camel kids that's on their cans of soup and cups and so forth. Anytime I saw Warren Phelps or Wynn Shadley driving their team down our street, I'd run out, jump on the tailgate, and ride 2 blocks to the factory corner and then walk back home. A trip to Hayden's Market for a half dozen bananas for 15 cents usually meant 2 trips, for I devoured most of them en route home, resulting in a terrible bellyache. And this is just a little thing I decided to throw in as I made a wish on the way up here that my arm had quit hurting. Is there anybody here that has never stamped a robin? You've not stamped a robin? No. Does everybody know what stamping a robin is? You see the first robins of spring, where they're kind of scattered. There's not as many as there are in the summer. Kiss your thumb, put it in there, and stamp it and make a wish. That's stamping a robin, and I do it to this day. The first stop on the way to town was the shoe factory stitching department to see Mom and Aunt Martha. At that time, there was a large expanse of grass all along the front of the building. In the mid-30s, the Andy Tanner family moved to Greenup and built a snack shop across the street by the alley. And they named it Wimpy's Palace. Several other families through the years have operated it when they got where they couldn't any longer, but that was Wimpy's Palace. Their son, called T, and I became great friends and spent many hours hunting 4-leaf clovers in that large yard. See a penny, pick it up all the day, you'll have good luck. A found clover or penny went into your shoe. They had a Scotty, and this is probably where that became my favorite breed, and I had 4 or 5 through my marriage years. And theirs was the only dog I ever saw that liked to eat oranges. Also across the street where the factory offices were built was a livery stable, and on the north corner, Wadley's Poultry House. I had a rolling wheel, a small and probably from a worn-out tricycle, which you pushed along with a T-bar stick. I never went to town without it until a bit older and paperbacks were mass marketed, and then I read as I walked to town. Next stop was the post office, to hear Holly Constant's parrot say, "Polly, want a cracker?" Don't step on a crack, or you'll break your mother's back. But do jump on the big iron covers inset into the sidewalk that were lifted up to send coal to the bank basement. At this time, there was a front entrance, just like it is today, to the bank, and an exit door on the west end. And some of our old pictures at the Historical Society show this. We walked up the vertical sidewalk and never around, but through the long center hall of the old townhouse, and then we'd pick up the sidewalk on the back side. We drank from the pump at each end, and if one was wired on, it didn't bother us that we all drank from the same dipper. Our first public square, now the Urba Complex, was called the Commons, and it was common for traveling circuses to set up here. When the Ewerts donated the downtown square to the village, it buzzed with activity. Band concerts, revivals, and the most popular, free shows on Monday night. Folks came from everywhere, spread their blankets on the ground in front of the screen, and returned the next week for To Be Continued, as most all the movies were Western serials. This would have been a perfect spot for a lemonade stand, popular kid activity in the summer. And this was when, as a first grader, I had my first date. Lowly Shaw came to my house, walked me the block and a half up to the park, and that was my first date. He also gave me a pearl ring, which my mom made me return immediately. She said it was a real pearl and real gold, and no doubt belonged to his mother. Cowboy stars, I recall, Tim McCoy, Buck Jones, Tom Mix, and Ken Maynard. Of course, we've all heard of Gene Autry and Roy Rogers, but these others are kind of passé now. Most of Greenup's 100th birthday celebration in 1934 was centered around the square. The female factory employees were attired in vintage apparel. Entertainment was on an outdoor stage at the southwest corner of the town hall. I tap danced, and I still had the bottom half of my costume, black velvet tights with gold button trim. I thought Ralph Eubank, that was Rosie's brother, and Hugh Eubank's father, was, with his painted face and feathered headdress, was a real Indian chief. Rosie and I ran in and out of his teepee all day. This must have been the beginning of my love of anything Native American. And kids also played under the bandstand. And as a teen, I played up in it, in Mark Carruthers' town band. And you could summon a pal 2 blocks away with the Tarzan call. And we were as good as Carol Burnett. We walked or rode our bikes from one end of town to the other, leaving after breakfast, home for a bite of lunch, back at supper time, then out again to play Barbaree. The neighborhood gang and friends divided into 2 groups for nighttime hide and seek. If you weren't having any luck finding, you'd call for a hint, whistle or holler, and if that wasn't successful, it was ollie ollie oxen free. Starlight, star bright, first star I see tonight. Wish I may, I wish I might have the wish I wish tonight. And I always wished for a pony. Of course, we did have a barn, but my mom said nix to that, because she knew you'd have to feed it and clean up the stable. And it wouldn't be me. My grandpa Bowman lived 2 miles up the pumping station road. That's the turnoff to the east, right there when you cross the Toledo Bridge. And that's where the pumping station was at the time. My cousin and his parents lived with Grandpa, and the cousin longed for a bicycle. I'd ride my bike up, give it to him, saddle up old Dolly, his Shetland, and head down the road to Sherwood's. Dolores, Donnie, and Harvey would get their ponies out, and it was over the river and through the woods. Then a trade back to another day. My grandfather would let me look at slides through his stereopticon, the forerunner of the Viewmaster, and I'm sure I would have loved him very much had I the opportunity. My mom never learned to drive, so we didn't have a car and our visiting was limited. If we went any place, it was with Aunt Martha. I was fascinated by the pianists on the little platforms in Terre Haute's Woolworth, playing the popular songs of the day and entertaining way to hawk sheet music. I don't know how many of those tiny painted turtles I went through, but I didn't know you weren't supposed to feed them lettuce and hamburger. That was their big diet. There was an old shed-type building behind or west out of the Wadley Poultry House, and I've always thought that it was the remnant of the Trent Hotel, for it had a small stage. We were always going there, dressing up and putting on circuses or shows. I practiced an improvised song and dance routine on this stage to the number, I've got love and a dime, I just found it in time. Now's when I want to know if Marilyn, who's probably asleep by now, if she remembers that song.
Nope, I don't remember that one.
I have not found anyone ever that I've asked who remembers this song. But lo and behold, I bought a box of music at an auction, and there it was.
Oh, for goodness sake.
And we used to hang a sheet on the clothesline, invite all the neighbors over, and put on shows. Admission was a bar of soap. We must have been pretty clean with all the soap we collected. We probably got a lot of ideas from Fred and Ginger. We also played movie star, the Three Stooges. Rosie had sort of a frizzy perm, so she was Larry. Dolores, it was Dolores Brown back then, but you would know her as Dee Owen. She was a bit pudgy, so she was Curly. Since I was a runt, I got to be Mo and slap the rest of them around. Of course, we copied everything the big girls did. I can only recall one, Photoplay, but there were dozens of movie magazines with 8 by 10 pictures. They would cut out their favorite stars and paste them in a big scrapbook, and of course we did likewise. I always favored the exotic look, so my favorites were Chinese Anna May Wong and Lupe Velez, the Mexican Spitfire. I did see one silent film, and it starred Lupe and Gary Cooper. My number one all-time favorite was the Sarong girl, Dorothy Lamour. And if she hadn't got old like me, she'd still be my favorite. I thought she was a real beauty, and I loved to hear her sing Moonlight and Roses. And of course, she was in a movie where they had a big hurricane. I think that was probably the name of the movie. Then in the post-pasting days of the 40s, I added Lana and Rita and Hetty. A must en route to the theater was a stop at the Greeks for a big bag of hot roasted jumbo peanuts mixed with red hots. For April Fools, they made luscious looking hand-dipped chocolates, but with a big garlic bud inside. I was one of the fools who fell prey to this trick in the darkened theater. My mom refused me the money to see Dante's Inferno or Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Too scary. But somehow, I managed to see both of them. I'd hate to have to clean the chewing gum out from under the seats. I hated Beeman's, but I loved Tea-Berry and Clove. Wish they still had it. You can get them maybe at the Cracker Barrel. A round sign using colored glass slides was positioned near the projectionist's cubbyhole and flashed local business ads on the screen, and I think we have a few of those up at the Historical Society. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you can see them up there. The movie was always accompanied by a cartoon and a newsreel. If you weren't engaged in Barbary at night, you were up on the factory corner, where half the kids in town congregated. The best place ever to skate on that new slick sidewalk. Everyone had roller skates that clamped to your shoes with a key. A few years down the road, we had portable rinks that set up at the East End, the site where all the semis are parked, or once in a while the fairgrounds. They consisted of a tent and a smooth wooden floor, and you could use your own roller skates or rent shoe skates. The most diverse place to play was the mineral well. Swing on the grapevines. Scale the steep north cliff by stepping on jutting pieces of shale while holding on to embedded roots. Run the length of the ridge and down the hill, across the field, and take a swim at the old sandbar. Wildflowers were profuse to pick and put in a colorful homemade construction paper May basket, place on somebody's doorstep, knock, and then run and hide to watch them find their surprise. A favorite birthday surprise was a new box of sharp Crayolas and a coloring book. A water paint box was a bit messy, but our tables were covered with oilcloth tablecloths. Our first tap dancing lessons were taught on the Ewart Opera House stage by Mr. Schomer of Terre Haute. He had one student who became a Hollywood star and played Alfalfa in the Our Gang comedies. We danced in several operettas put on for a benefit of some sort, I presume, by the high school, and they were assisted by various talented townspeople. If your parent was a factory employee, you might be asked to model a new design and would be given the shoes. The Edelbricks were very generous in giving shoes to the needy, particularly at Christmas. Now, like the cereals, this is to be continued at the next meeting, where we will get into school days and maybe more naughty than nice. I'm not quite through. One more thing.
Oh, okay.
I know you'd like to get rid of me.
No.
As a child, I saw Tarzan almost naked. Cinderella, she stayed out after midnight. Pinocchio, he told lies. And Aladdin, he was a thief. Batman drove over 200 miles an hour. Popeye had tattoos and smoked a pipe. Snow White, she lived with 7 men. So don't blame me for being wild. Blame Walt Disney. The next program is going to be called a tad older and a bit bolder. Older and a bit bolder. School days, dear old golden rule days, reading and writing and arithmetic. Well, we didn't have kindergarten nor preschool, and neither did my girls. And the only one I ever heard of was told to me by Luna York when she was very aged. And when she was 4 years old, she said she attended a school on the old Dillon Hotel site. And if you've been following our Facebook site, our site on Facebook, you've seen these pictures recently of the Dillon Hotel. Now this would probably be before 1900. Our first and second grades were held in an annex connected to the main building by a breezeway type roof. And in the 1930s, the high school seniors had what they called class day, where they read their history and their class poem and the prophecy and all that stuff that the kids write. And they were presented for the undergrads in a program. Well, as second graders, Kenny Fritz and I were selected to participate in one of the programs, and this was either the class of 1933 or 34. Starts out 33, and by the time you get to January, then it's 34. So I need to look some of the people up and see in one of the books where it lists all the graduates and see if I can find somebody I recognize as having done this. But they put a big book up, made a big book for the stage, and it had leaves in it. And Kenny stood on one side and I stood on the other side, and we would pull the leaves off back, and a senior would step through, senior that was graduating. And they were back behind the back of the stage. And Kenny was given 10 cents with which to buy us each an ice cream cone at the candy kitchen. Well, however, he announced he was going to be the recipient of both ice cream cones. Now, I can't recall if I cried or not. Probably did. But he reiterated that he was only teasing. The Greek's ice cream cones were so large we couldn't finish them on the walk back to school. So we sat on the fire escape steps and polished them off. And Kenny and I must have thought we were pretty special, for we were the only two kids that got to stand while playing in the rhythm band. He played the triangle and I played the cymbals. I don't recall ever hearing a regular school band in the 30s, but we must have had one, because I can recall Jerry Brown's mother, Alberta, playing a clarinet, and my husband, Chuck, a cornet, and the director's name, I remember him, Henry Wilcoxon. There was a good-looking beauty operator that had a sister here, and this lady moved in from someplace else and went in business up over Wiles Insurance when it was down there by Holtz. And she was quite a knockout, and she had a daughter that was too. They called her the Blonde Bombshell. And the boys were all crazy about her. She looked like Marilyn Monroe. But this Henry Wilcoxon, the director, started dating her, and they got married, and they moved away. And that's probably then, right after that, that should have been about 1939, because Ray Lane came in as band director after that. Let's see. As I was a-walking on Paradise Street, yo-ho, blow the man down, a pretty young damsel I happened to meet. Give me some time to blow the man down. Now, that's the only song I came away with from our vocal music class, which we had under a Mrs. Baker. And, my mother had told me that my father's favorite song was By the Waters of the Minnetonka. Anybody here besides Marilyn? Marilyn doesn't even know that
I
one?
remember his name, but I don't remember.
Okay, well, of course you can tell I would have loved it too, because it was Indian. Okay, well, we must have had a Victrola, for it was written in 1927, and I cannot recall a time when I didn't know the melody. Now, not the lyrics. Okay, one time in grade 4, Mrs. Baker took requests, and so I asked for it, and by golly, she knew it, and she sang it. And, it had been written like an Indian brave singing a love song to a maiden, and apparently her name was Moon Deer. And he sang it like he was trying to speak white man's tongue. So there were only 2 words in every line, like moon dear, how near, and it goes on like that with just the rest of the song with only 2 words. And I happened to go to a sale one time, and I was always looking for sheet music because that's what I collect, and I found a copy of it. And now, if you are really interested in hearing that song, just go to YouTube, because Lucy and Desi did a skit on it, and it's hilarious.
Yeah.
Oh, you do know it, then.
Yeah, I knew the song, but
Yeah.
I tried to play certain.
Lucy and Desi did a hilarious skit on it. Now Ray Lane, when he came to be our band director, there weren't enough numbers. So he combined junior high and high school kids. And we wore white slacks or skirts and navy blazers for a uniform. And most every kid in school selected and tried a horn. Now, if you continued, the rental applied to the purchase of the instrument. And of my gang, only one, Fred Nichols, kept his horn. And we both had saxophones, and we became best friends. And since Mr. Lane's horn was a saxophone, we often fronted the band with a sax trio. And then we also had a swing band. And until the union stopped us, the band, joined by alumna and out-of-towners, played between races at the fair. Now, one of these out-of-towners was Gene Trimble. Of course, he's related to Jerry and me and the Fogelmans and Hope Apples, all awards, and he has this strolling clown band, and he has a dance band, and they're still going strong. He played my kind of music from the big band era. And, but they would come, they either lived in Oakland or Newman, someplace up in that era, area, and they showed the homes at our county fair. So they just bring their instruments, and Gene played trumpet, and his brother Jack, who unfortunately got killed, he played saxophone, sat by me. Our teachers all encouraged poetry and reading, especially Esteline Miller in the 3rd grade. Sunny Elephant was my favorite story, and elephants are still my favorite wild animal. I watch all I can find on National Geographic Wild. And in warm weather, the west windows would be opened, and we could hear the pounding of the blacksmith across the street. And that was either Sam or Tom Patrick. They lived on the corner, but the blacksmith shop was right there on the alley. Be the shoe factory alley. And it'd be right behind Brad Gray's feed store. High on the literary list were Tom Sawyer, Huck Finn, Penrod, the Bobbsey twins, and Aesop's Fables, particularly The Boy Who Cried Wolf. And oh, how I relish the days when I slid down that black iron railing out here on the library steps. Now I gotta hold on to get up the steps. A must was Aunt Hester's candy store on the IGA corner, where for 1 penny you could purchase 9 little black N babies and 7 lemon drops. We girls didn't carry coin purses or pocketbooks. We stretched out a large handkerchief or a bandana, put our coins in the corner, secured them by tying a knot. And that's what we carried instead of a purse. Handkerchiefs were a very popular gift item, and one usually had an abundance. And some were quite elaborate with fancy embroidery and lace edging. Now, throwaways, or Kleenex, were introduced in 1934, but only to movie stars at that time to remove their makeup. My choice for candy could only be found at Doc Broom's drugstore. That's where Dr. Dill the dentist is today. It's a bit more expensive. For 10 cents, you could get a small bottle. Yes, they came in a bottle of Horlicks malted milk tablets. Light brown tablets about the size of a fat nickel. I took pen lessons from Miss Agnes Camel across the street, and I gained enough musical knowledge to make the saxophone easy, but I hated to practice, and my mom let me quit. I wish she'd swatted me a good one and made me stick with it, for the bane of my adult existence in life is that I did not become proficient at the piano, and I did not attend college. And I know now that I would have loved it, but too soon old, too late smart. My career began at age 6 or 7. 31 years as a waitress. The Brian McMorris home, where he began his printing business, backed up to the shoe factory alley, and his sons Bill and Bud started a small snack stand for the employees. I continually pestered them to let me help, and I was quite deflated to be told I was too little. For some reason, waitressing is a degrading occupation. Perhaps public opinion is that you're too dumb to do anything else. I loved every minute of it. And it was actually a learning experience for me, because I met many nationalities of diners, And it encouraged me to learn hello, how are you, please, thank you, goodbye, and you're welcome in several different languages. I don't recall our school of the 1940s offering anything in the way of foreign languages except for Latin 1 and 2. And neither did we have football, soccer, tennis, volleyball, golf, or wrestling. It was just basketball and softball or baseball only. Extracurricular activities were directed more toward the arts. Football was dropped somewhere along the way, for it was played at Greenup High. The center of the fairground racetrack was the playing field. The downtown businesses closed from 2 to 5 in the afternoon on October 18th, 1928, for Greenup's first football game, played against Willow Hill. But I have never been able to find a report that tells me who won. Willow Hill's smaller than Greenup, so I'm guessing maybe it was us, but I don't know. If at no other time everyone attended church on Easter Sunday, resurrected in a brand new outfit. You didn't see as many hooded jackets, but the girls all had several headscarves. A popular place to play was in the big piles of dirt that were left under the 130 bridge south here after it was construction, and in the flume that ran under the street named Edelbrick Drive when it was built. It's so large I can still walk through it, and originally the drive turned west and circled back up onto Broadway Street, similar to a cul-de-sac. And here the remnants of an old bridge lead me to believe that this is the original Palestine crossing. In Lincoln's day, there would have been no railroads to cross, so need for an extension of Edelbrick Drive was unnecessary. Unfortunately, all of this property is now closed, along with an important chapter of our history. We had scooters and pogo sticks instead of skateboards and trampolines. We had recess with a ball diamond on the southeast corner of the school ground. They're beginning to eliminate recess now in the middle schools. My 8th grade great-grandson in Atlanta, I'm going to guess they probably don't have recess because he is taking Russian for his elective language. We had orthography and penmanship, and rumors now say that cursive writing will soon be eliminated. Times really change. If you wanted to please the teacher, clean the erasers. If you displeased her, you would sit alone in the cloakroom during class. We were taken out of class to see the Graf Zeppelin overhead or watch an eclipse. My 13-year-old great-grandson in Terre Haute, this is the apple of my eye, is always interested in the biggest or the widest or the tallest, whatever. And I really impressed him when I told him I'd seen Robert Wadlow. Is there anybody here that doesn't know who Robert Wadlow was? Don't know?
I don't think I do.
You don't know?
I do know.
Oh, you do know. Okay, you tell us.
He's the tallest man in the world.
Right. He was the tallest man in the world. He was from Alton, Illinois. I saw him on downtown street. I don't know what he was doing in Greenup, but he was right down there in front of Broom's drugstore. And so, of course, when I told my great-grandson he was the tallest man in the world at 8'11", my Charlie went straight for the iPad and starts pulling him up. See if somebody beat him, that's somebody taller. There isn't. He died in 1940, but still holds the record. Down in the valley where the green grass grows, there sat Martha, sweet as a rose. She sang, she sang, she sang so sweet. Along came John and kissed her on the cheek. How many kisses did he give her? 1, 2, 3. How many times can you skip rope without missing? Red Rover, come over, come over. Black man, wood tag. Oh, look, on that tree, someone's carved a heart, and underneath it says, Jerry plus Dixie. You might be engaged if you have a cigar band ring. Rich man, poor man, beggar man, thief, doctor, lawyer, merchant, chief. Who will you marry? Little house, big house, pig pen, barn. Silk, satin, calico, rags. Shoes, slippers, boots. Girls divulged their secret loves to their daily diary. And woe be to anyone who found where they'd hidden the key. Flirting to the young lads was throwing a green garden snake on a girl. Of course, we were petrified. I figured out my salvation was in beating them at their own game. So I summoned up every bit of courage I had and I said, "Oh, it's so cute. May I hold it?" Well, that turned their attention to the girls that had scream and run. So I didn't have to worry about it anymore. Good morning to you, good morning to you. We're all in our places with bright shining faces. For this is the way to start a new day. And we started it each morning with this little ditty in Alta Yago's 5th grade class. She taught many, many years, and she absolutely would not tolerate chewing gum. The lower grades put on a multitude of plays and musicals. The other grades were invited to your room for the entertainment. And the theme for Thanksgiving season always had the Mayflower, Pilgrims and Indians, and the Miles Standish, Priscilla Mullen, John Alden story. I found an old picture of a Christmas nativity scene that appears to have several different aged youngsters as characters in it. I'm so small, I could not have been past grade 1. And so I must have been an angel. Me? For I'm standing near the manger and wearing a long white gown with a gold star headpiece. The entire junior high presented an operetta one time. I was probably in the 6th grade, with a medieval theme that was we really enjoyed rehearsing for this. Nate Peters was the king and I was the queen, and we sang madrigal type songs with the court seated around a long table. And since this was before the days of cutlery, why we enjoyed rehearsing was we got to eat with our fingers fried chicken legs, and it's still my favorite food. My mom used to kill a chicken by wringing its neck, and I just didn't like watching it all because it flopped around all over the ground. However, when we got the feed store hatchery, it came with a banty rooster that hated me. I couldn't walk out the back door without getting spurred, and I would not have mourned its demise. And the older classes put on a very entertaining carnival yearly with a different event in each classroom. Maybe one would have magicians, fortune tellers, minstrels, musicals, clowns, and you would just go from one room to another and see a show here and then go see one there. And there were no laws or regulations on fireworks, so we had the ordinary firecrackers, cherry bombs, torpedoes, snakes, spinners, red devils, about everything, of course sparklers, but they let them have those now. The huge and lavishly decorated Valentine box brought yearly excitement with hopes of getting a card from that special one, but it often brought heartbreak too, for some got none. And then there were those that were supposed to be comic, but were downright mean. My daughter Dana Lou had a good trick for this situation. Each pupil in her middle school class had the names of several others, and they were to write a letter to these people stating what they liked about them, their good qualities and traits, their personality, and then she would bring them home. And if I was over there on the weekend, we'd check the letters out. And if some smarty pants or bully had written a nasty letter, we'd revise it and make it complimentary. So when the kid got it, why, they would have something nice said about them. We did not trick or treat like they do today. We just tricked at Halloween. And we didn't do a lot of Halloweening till we had a getaway car. And then, watch out. Many's the time we were chased by the town cop known as Step and a Half because he had a club foot. As children, we just rattled windows with a tic-tac, a large notched thread spool with a nail in the center and wound with a long string to pull. We were afraid to approach the Bosworth property, where Ted Laddie built his home. For the story was that the yard was full of dead and buried Civil War soldiers. The home looked like a southern plantation. We do have a picture of that somewhere, by the way, Linda and Jerry. It's not very good, and it's have you seen it? No, it's probably a reprint. We wouldn't have the original, but it's a very interesting picture. And it's set way back on the lot, like most southern plantations do, with a long sidewalk leading up from the street to the porch, dividing the graveyards. This was an eccentric and apparently affluent family, for Susie and her husband Ross owned several downtown buildings. That one time they owned the Greeks, and I think that's when Mr. Reeder was there, and then they were the ones that built his news store for him there by the coffee shop. Not his last store, but the one before that. And our historical lore says that Ross's father, Admiral, or A.K. Bosworth, was a friend of Benjamin Franklin. Now, if you've ever read any Cumberland County history, you're familiar with A.K. Bosworth. Ever after her husband Ross died, Susie dressed in mourning, all black, with a little black parasol. Quite a character. One Halloween, a group of my guy friends rigged up a bucket of water with a rope in a tree in front of Suzanne Bland's house, which was across the street from Susie's, hoping to pull the chain on Susie. But I protested enough that they discarded the idea. We did do some kind of naughty things, but I left that one out because I'm the one that did it. I left several things out of this story because it's going to be so long. Dolores Brown, or Dee Owen, to you people that remember her, taught me to drive. We'd sit in her dad's Peanuts Roadster and practice shifting gears. By age 13, I was driving a pickup on Saturdays to Montrose, gathering cases of eggs from farmers along the way for our hatchery feed store. And that was the one Brad Gray. That was our business that Brad Gray bought. Bread boy, every morning this old man would make the neighborhood with a little two-wheeled cart selling bread, and Grandma'd send me out with 15 cents to get a loaf. Now, I have in my notes his name was McMorris, but I didn't have a first name. So I called Marge at the press office. Well, she says, I think his name was Morris McMorris. I said, okay, I'll put that in my book. Then later on in the day, she called me back and she said, no, I think he wasn't Mr. McMorris. I think he was Mr. Morris. So now I have no idea. I thought, sure, I was looking for both names, and I called Red Green. And Red can't even remember the bread boy, though he should, because they were neighbors to me. They're the house that looks so terrible that the arsonists set on fire, cattywampus, across from Doc Houghton's place. Oh, and that's where they lived. And I lived where the Catholic Parish Hall is. Emil Parker had the same type of wooden cart with which to deliver the daily paper. Smoke, smoke, smoke that cigarette. Smoke, smoke, smoke until you smoke yourself to death. Okay. Prior to being cleared out by Dan Stewart, the area around the Mike Schrock home was James's Woods. This is where the teachers took us on field trips. However, our gang sneaked away from the rest of the group and smoked cigarettes. Acquiring them didn't seem to present much of a problem. We'd gather up Aggie Brown's milk bottles, take them to Bancroft's grocery, that's where the Erba Annex is now, and exchange them, and we'd tell Ernie, the owner, that these cigarettes were for Peanut Brown, Dolores' dad. And so Marbles were 10 cents a pack, and Sunshines were a nickel. And Ernie didn't question why Peanut wasn't smoking Camels or Lucky Strikes or something instead of those El Cheapos. He just took the bottles and gave us the cigarettes. The neighbors refrained from calling the fire department when the smoke came rolling out of the moon and stars in the backyard. Cigarettes and whiskey and wild, wild women. Barmaids were a popular feature of odors, as Western movies were called, and there were plenty of scenes in movies with saloons, drinking, and gunfights. And my neighbors and their friends were surely party people, for our alley was always loaded, if you'll pardon the pun, with every conceivable kind of bottle tossed up against the side of their barn. We collected a variety, and by soaking different colors of crepe paper in water, we made an assortment of pretend alcoholic beverages. And we would pour them in these bottles and sell them from a wooden plank bar that we rigged up in our barn loft. Of course, our saloon scene required cigarettes. If the real deal was not available, one could try coffee grounds rolled up in newspaper. Now, we quickly abstained from this, for it was a rather futile idea. The newspaper fired up rapidly. The grounds fell out on the floor, and the flames singed your eyebrows. We had 8th grade graduation, formal graduation exercises on stage, a presentation of diplomas, just like the high school had. And I'll never forget that first formal gown. And my mom dyed it, the chiffon skirt part of it, after I got in high school for my first high school dance. So I got a couple of wears out of that. We celebrated the end of school with the junior high walking up Route 130 to a hill on the west with a wooded area to have a wiener roast. Now this is near where the Mitchell and Duvall families built their homes. My first big heartbreak came as a 6th grader with a monster crush on an 8th grade boy. He wanted a kiss, and I was too shy. But we had one that wasn't, and he became her boyfriend. The end of school for the high school, the classes were transported in the back of a huge truck for a day at Paris Lake. Annuals or yearbooks must have gone the way of football, for I've seen some very old-fashioned ones, but we didn't have any. We bought and wrote notes in autograph books and exchanged wallet-sized photos. Most everyone had a nickname. I compiled a list of over 400 Greenup and school kids and just whoever I could think of that had a nickname, and put on a program at the society one time, and it was like a guessing game. I'd say a nickname, and then the audience was to guess who belonged to that nickname. And we've got a few here tonight. We got a Weezer, and a cat, and a tip, and a hook, and a smike. Now, if I missed one, I don't know about. And Anybody else got a nickname? Oh, find my place here. Okay. The lowdown on high school. We're loyal to you, Greenup High. We're the white and the blue, Greenup High. We were the Blue Devils. We all went to our homes for lunch, but we ate as fast as we could so we could hop on a car and get down to the Edelbrick Drive to the Flume for a cigarette before the bell rang. When the country kids entered, it added 3 more to our girl group of 6. One of them lived in a downtown apartment, which would be upstairs over where Kathy Kogel Aston has her antiques shop. We would gather in her bathroom after school to smoke. On one occasion, her mom got off early from the shoe factory and up the back stairway, across the roof, and in the door she came, and we heard her. We all threw our cigarettes in the toilet at once, and when she opened the bathroom door, the sparks were shooting in the air like an erupting volcano. If you played your cards right, you could get 9 in a car at the same time by sitting on laps, and a couple more could ride on the running board. I was always the first one in, for I was the smallest of the gang. My place was to lie down behind the back seat in front of the rear vision glass, and that was where I did my riding in the car. It wasn't too comfortable, but it'd be worse now with my bad hip. If my father had lived, I've always had a hearsay impression that he would have been a strict disciplinarian. Since I had free rein to do most anything I wanted, part of the time I ran with girls 2 and 3 years older than I. Apparently my freshman girlfriends were on a tighter leash. We would do just about anything to get to a dance. We'd beggar ride, go on the Greyhound, and if necessary, we'd even hitchhike. On weekends, the big outdoor pavilion at T-Town and the Dance Palace at Vandalia had big name orchestras. Excuse me, and by the time we reached the junior and senior level, the routine was close up the Green Lantern at midnight, on to Elsie's Club in Siegel. Now that was more like a Dancing with the Stars on TV. It had a great big dance floor, and it had the big crystal ball up at the top. It was more of a nightclub, and they had a lot of live orchestras. Then we closed it up at 2 in the morning, and it was back to Effingham and the Courthouse Cafe for breakfast. Home about 5. I drove this old flivver. It was probably a late 30s or early 40s model. And one night, en route home, the door fell off. We retrieved it, and the girl in the passenger seat had to hold it on all the way to Greenup. Tempus fugits, and I won't get on my soapbox about today, and I use the word very loosely, music. 3 guitar chords and 1 line repeated for 10 to 15 minutes just doesn't do it for me. Nor does some of the versions I've heard of our national anthem. They're disgraceful. Of course, We had our silly songs, but at least they had a tune and they told a story. Hold tight, hold tight, hold tight, hold tight, Poo-Ratty Ackasack want some seafood. Mama, shrimpers and rice are very nice. Huts at Rawlson on the Rilla and Brawla Suet. Couple of them. And in the song, they explain the huts at Rawlson. It's a Swedish town. The Rilla is a stream. Brawla's a boy and girl. They go on with that in the song. I was in about every musical activity available. Solos, ensembles, trios, choruses, contests. About all my best friends were good singers also. And we formed a sextet, singing pop hits of the day at local functions. One such occasion was at the Oddfellow Rebecca Lodge, where they had a big event, and we were part of the entertainment. One of our songs had been recorded by Bing, and it was called the Gaucho Serenade. To be phonetically correct, we gave the word patio the Latin flavor. Si, senor, he's a happy troubadour, on a patio you'll find him. And when we got to the word patio, we looked at each other and we started giggling. And we just about choked because we couldn't suppress our laughter. And we finally got the tune finished. You'd never believe, with my booming foghorn voice and bass, singing bass, that I was one of only 2 girls in the whole school that could reach high C. We learned a lot of words by way of the Hit Parader magazine. It was a magazine with song lyrics. I must have saved all of mine, for I have a big stack. I looked them up on the internet and they're worth about $10 a piece now. We also listened to the Saturday Night Hit Parade on the radio. The others that were favorites were Big Band Leader, Kay Kaiser's College of Musical Knowledge, and the romantic love songs of Sammy Kaye's Sunday Serenade. We could send for the words that we might wallow in self-pity over an unrequited love. Every high school student was assigned a desk on the first day of school in our large assembly room, and this was their home base between classes. We had a large stage with a big blackboard behind it, and if punishment of staying after school was required, our babysitter was usually a teacher who couldn't keep order. So the boys entertained us by throwing erasers at the blackboard or rolling ball bearings up the aisle to hit the stage. One side of the assembly hall had 2 library tables and a wall of bookcases, and we would congregate here, pretending, of course, that we were researching some school subject for class. What we were really researching was Greek statues, trying to find out if one had lost his fig leaf. One guy and one gal one day were at the library table, and one let out a big belch. They both had the knack of swallowing air and belching at will. So the other gave a resounding echo. This continued into a contest. Seated at the end of the table, I could see down the hall. And here comes the principal. I tried every method of alerting them, with facial expressions. And nothing did any good. They were too into it. So the principal reaches the doorway, and he stands like this and listens. They were required to stay after school in his office and belch nonstop for 30 minutes. After this, they were so sick that I think they were probably ready to go the whole mile. We did have a foolproof plan for passing on oral true and false tests. If we were certain that we had the correct answer, we would signal 1 for true and 2 for false. And so we would pass this down through the class. And so it'd be like this, 2 fingers behind your head, down by your side, or scratching 2 fingers over here. Any way we could get a true or a false. And everybody made a pretty good grade this way on the true and false test. One day we decided we'd take the afternoon off. We piled in the car and down to the Walnut country. We played around a while and then finally decided to return to school. But we all had to have the same story, so we rehearsed what we were going to say. So it was supposed to be we were taking Smike Shell home for lunch. We got the car stuck and couldn't get it out, and so forth and so forth. And we were required to write the story, each one of us. Well, I must have turned in 3 pages. And my good buddy Fred turned in 3 words. We played hooky. I suppose we should cover the sex topic. There's not much covered anymore. In olden days, a glimpse of stocking was looked on as something shocking. Now heaven knows, anything goes. Well, I'm far from a prude, but I am just astounded at the way our nation has been consumed with sex, from presidents to priests. It's everywhere. Records, TV, computers, newspapers, advertising. Skin is in, from the back to the crack and the front to the Caribbean.
Whoa.
Bikinis are nothing more than strings, and Victoria's Secret has long been revealed. In the primary grades, after the big boys initiated the little boys with what was called dirty Bibles, we pretty well figured out that some of the alien objects discarded on the school ground were not balloons. Ours was not a promiscuous age. We'd never even heard of cleavage. I figured of the 9 girls in our gang, there probably could be 2 or 3 rotten apples in the barrel. But I didn't want to know, and I gave everyone the benefit of the doubt. That was the boys' problem, to learn who did and who didn't. And if they couldn't figure that out, there was always the Montrose girls. Since in our more Puritan era, as 15-year-olds, and I just read this in the paper yesterday, We were not concerned about how much over-the-counter after pill was going to cost, or, as they say today, with making out. From time to time, we were entertained on the assembly stage by professional speakers, magicians, musicians, and the administrators concluded we needed some sex education. So they secured a lecturer. We were divided into male and female groups for these programs. And if you think this didn't stir up a hornet's nest, you are sadly mistaken. All we talked about for months was sex. We may as well have all been left together. The boys divulged what he told them, and vice versa. Standing on the corner, watching all the girls go by. Well, this was not just a song, it was a Saturday night event with the guys on the Greek's corner and the girls walking to the bank corner, across the street, back down to the coffee shop and back across to the Greeks. If, as they say today, you hooked up during this marathon, you might start going steady, and in which case you'd wear the boy's leather sweater and his class ring. Do's and don'ts for the fashionistas. I had a fur coat when I was a freshman. A freshman with a fur coat. I imagine the coat. Wait a minute. Oh, here it is. I really thought I was hot stuff. Imagine the coat was hot stuff too, because it was. The man came up to the door. He had a carload full of fur coats. He brought several in for us to try. Mom bought one for herself and one for me. And away he went, and he didn't leave a calling card. Taboos. Only 2 colors were worn at the same time. Definitely no more than 3. No red on the redhead. No red and orange together. No checks and plaids together. No jewelry with sports uniforms. Flat shoes only with slacks or pants. No earrings for children. Gypsies and Latinos only. Shoes and handbag must match. And we could not have even imagined long hair and women's jewelry for men, shaved heads, body piercings, and tattoos. Now, I'm not talking about a sailor putting his girlfriend's name on his arm, her mother, but all over. And if anyone has never seen Chris Anderson, called the Birdman, who's an NBA player for Miami Heat, you don't know what you've missed. He's the most hideous looking. He's worse than Godzilla. It's worth pulling up on the internet just to see his tattoos and his mohawk. Unfortunately, we did not yet have blue jeans. But if we did, I doubt very much that we would have cut holes in a new pair to make them look old. Saddle Oxfords and Mexican Huaraches had a long run and were very popular, and running a close second were white cowboy boots like the majorettes wore. We did come up with a couple of fads that were absolutely atrocious. Girls wore bib overalls. And we had a spell where we wore men's work boots. They came up to just below the knee, laced all the way with little silver rivets. And then you wore a wool sock underneath them and turned the cuff of it down about like that over the top of the boots. What were we thinking? Memories. Did you ever play Andy over? Make spitballs, throw paper wads, do a card trick, let a balloon soar with your address attached, or throw a bottle in the river with a note in it. Make a dandelion necklace. I don't know the name of this plant and I can't find it out. There's a little flat plant on the ground, oval shaped. You could snip, it's a succulent. You could snip it off and blow in it and it would blow up like a little toad. Don't know the name of it. We did that all the time. Eat red haws, mulberries. There were an abundance of mulberry and red haw trees in town. I haven't seen one for years, either one.
I've got a mulberry in the backyard, you want it?
Really? No, I don't want it because I know what they do to your car.
Oh, it's in the backyard.
But they were good. You ever make mulberry pie with them?
No,
A lot of people do.
okay.
Did you ever eat Shropshire? Anybody here eat Shropshire? It's just a little bitty ground cover plant. And it's real sour. You pull it off. Dixie's eating it. Did you ever make a paper airplane? See the gypsy camps at the fairground in the Casa Loma? Try to beat someone at blowing the biggest bubblegum bubble. Chalk out a sidewalk hopscotch game. Watch Betty Boop ride in a rumble seat. Play tic-tac-toe, old maid, dive in a feather bed. Play Monopoly. Now, the reason I mention that, it still goes today. But I played Monopoly the first year it came out, 1935 at my cousin's in Robinson. Listen in on a party line. 3 short rings were an emergency. See downtown interurban tracks. Not in Greenup. Mattoon, and town's that big. Take a train ride. Hunt Indian beads. Mussel shells. Swing on a grapevine. Play pickup sticks. Tiddlywinks. Own a yo-yo. Jack in the box. Have a wooden drain. A juice harp. A harmonica. Make a kazoo from a comb and tissue paper. Have a paddle ball. Marionette. Make a jack-o'-lantern. We still do that today. If we got little kids in the family. Steal watermelons. And I was going to stop right here, but I will have to tell you what we did when we stole watermelons. We would go down to the Scotch Chapel School and we'd sit on the steps and eat the watermelon, and then we got finished, we'd take the rinds and we'd throw them up in the belfry trying to ring the school bell. You may think that this is the end. Well, it is.
you.